Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Sunday Show. I'm Thersites the Historian, and tonight it is time for Halloween Stream 2021. Tonight we're going to be doing a couple of different things. Nothing too spectacular, but this has been a rather busy week for me, as I've been trying to get caught up on my work. I have about 350 students this semester, so that entails a good amount of housekeeping, grading, not to mention lecturing. I've been putting out quite a few videos the last several days, as some of you are aware. And yeah, it's been a long week. I'm hoping this week will be a little easier. I only have about one more video I need to get out before I will be done with this coming week, so that will be nice. And, yeah, I don't really know exactly what else will be coming down the pipe in the immediate future. Sean and I are thinking for next Sunday that we'd like to do Achaemenid Persia. So, that is probably what we will end up doing, but I don't know with 100% certainty as of yet. And hopefully this coming week, since I only have one video I need to upload for class, I will be able to work ahead a little bit, do some more Roman stuff for the week after that, and possibly also do something that I actually want to do, like another Byzantine emperor or something like that. But I don't want to get too ambitious here because right now just keeping caught up with the teaching load is consuming a massive amount of my time. And no, I'm just a lecturer right now, so I do not receive the pay or benefits of a full professor, although I'd really like that for obvious reasons. Okay, let's see. I think the stream is going okay in terms of the speed and everything. Everybody here? Everybody's good to go? Okay, yeah, the sound is still good, at least in theory. So, okay. Well, I thought we'd start with something kind of fun. I don't really have any Halloween-specific ideas. I didn't really get too much into the mood this year. We did try to watch some horror movies, which was kind of cool. And one of the things that I did with my girlfriend last night is we actually went out to a theater where they were showing the original John Carpenter's Halloween from 1978 in theaters. So it was my first time seeing it in that format, and maybe only my third or fourth time seeing it ever. And yeah, I can definitely see why it was such a big hit. The theme is really spot on. I think the theme does so much for that movie. And it's neat to be able to see old movies in theaters to really experience them the way that people did when they came out. So I was pretty grateful to have that opportunity. I do have to say it definitely holds up a lot better than a lot of things that are just coming out right now. For instance, we also watched Truth or Dare this past week from 2017, and that movie fucking sucks. And I had a lot of trouble paying attention to that. I don't really know what my favorite horror movie is, Taco, but it's definitely not Truth or Dare, I can tell you that much. Halloween's got to be up there, and then I guess it depends on whether you consider some movies horror or sci-fi. I mean, Alien and The Thing are also really, really good horror movies, but you could also classify them as sci-fi. I guess it depends on where you draw the line. Um, Problem for me is I can't suspend disbelief very easily, so most horror movies that scared other people don't really do much for me at all. I know, like, when I was a preteen, that's when Scream came out. And I know a lot of people were terrified by Scream, but I always saw the goofiness of it. So for me, Scream always had that goofy quality to it. So I kind of enjoyed it a little bit because of the tongue-in-cheek quality. But whereas a lot of my friends genuinely found it to be scary, I was just kind of like, man, this is goofy. And especially once you get to Scream 2 and 3, and then fucking David Arquette's character just keeps surviving after being brutally stabbed over and over and over every movie. Oh, thank you, Charles. Charles Bolduc gave a super chat for $5 Canadian. Good evening, Thersites. Thanks for all the great lectures recently. Well, you're welcome. Hopefully the students will watch them. That's always a challenge. Um, because I can see how many students actually access these lectures on Carmen, and sometimes it's a bit distressing that I put all this work in the shit and then people don't watch it or do the readings. So it's kind of not great to be able to see that happen. Jaws and Alien, yes, Jay Bird. Those are also very, very good. I have not seen The Omen, though. Taco Cruiser, $5. Have you ever seen the movie Event Horizon? That's another really good one. And actually, I only know about that one because of my uncle Matt. He's a big fan of Event Horizon. He recommended that back in the day. Um, that one to me almost seems like it sort of could take place in the same universe as Doom. You know, where you could start out with Event Horizon and then one of the Marines on board becomes the Doom guy, and then that's how you get into the Doom cinematic universe. I'm just throwing that out there as an idea. It's probably how I would have done it if I had been in charge of a studio, but, you know. So, I figured for this evening, and also thank you for the Dolno Taco Cruiser. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do hopefully what amounts to a fun activity. I've never tried this quiz before, so I don't even know if it works or not, but I guess we'll find out together. I'm going to see which NBA player I am. Because if I had played any sport professionally or at any level, it would definitely be basketball. It's the only one I've ever played really at all. And I can't really say I'm much of an athlete, but I can hit three-pointers pretty well. So I guess the real answer would probably be somebody like Steve Kerr or Kyle Korver or something like that. But we'll see what this quiz tells me. Okay, so this looks like one of those sites that has the potential to be a bit buggy, but nonetheless, if I could play for, if you had to be a fan for any one of these teams, which would it be? Um, I guess I'd probably have to go with the Warriors. And I actually kind of like the '90s Warriors. I remember an NBA Jam; they were one of my favorite squads, and of course they've had more recent success. But I always liked like Chris Mullin and Ronnie Cycli and Tim Hardaway, the original master of the crossover, and Mitch Richmond was really good. They had Chris Webber at one point. So I've always kind of liked the Warriors a little bit, and then I kind of lost track of them. I actually did not know about the We Believe Warriors, partly because I didn't watch very much basketball in the aughts, but partly just because they didn't actually do all that much, and they were kind of a team only for Warriors fans. But yeah, the Warriors have always had some interesting players at the bare minimum. Whereas I can't really say that for these other teams. I mean, the Rockets had Olajuwon, who was pretty awesome, and Drexler at one point, but yeah, and then Cleveland, even though they're the more local team for me, I've never really been able to get into Cleveland. And then OKC, I mean, they should have stayed in Seattle. Moving to OKC was a huge mistake. Alright. So they give you a blue button, but then you can just scroll. My position, so center's not an option, but that's okay because it wouldn't be center anyway. I would probably play shooting guard. It's kind of what I do, I think, when I play pickup, unless I'm sort of forced into the paint. Because I actually shoot better from outside of the paint than I do inside. And I guess I'm pretty good at making difficult shots, because I'm usually giving up athleticism to a lot of other people, so most of my shots end up being difficult. But I still manage to score usually, so I guess I'd go shooting guard, maybe small forward. I'm not a good enough ball handler to be a point guard. And I'm also not really a pass first guy. I'm better at shooting. It's not that I'm like inclined to not pass. I'm just physically not great at passing. I'm much better at shooting for whatever reason. Um, and as far as power forward, yeah, I'm not into the paint stuff. I'm not really effective down there. What do you like on the court? Graceful, aggressive, confident, or focused? Hmm. Definitely not graceful. I'm definitely not aggressive. I usually don't try to up the ante, especially in pickup games. I mean, I don't see why people get all animated and heated over a pickup game, or why people dive for loose balls and risk injury, to save a $5 ball. I mean, the only way I'd ever do anything like that in a pickup game is if I thought that behaving in that way would impress some woman who was there and help me get laid. Like, there's no way I'd do that just because, right? I mean, I don't know anybody would. There are people who do that, though. Just in front of other guys, they'll go out there and get ultra competitive and get themselves all fucked up. What are you doing? Stop it. I guess I'd go with focused. I don't know. I guess the truth is probably more that I just kind of hang around the perimeter and wait for the ball. That's probably, I guess, does that count as focused? I don't know. Or does it count as confident since I know I'll make threes? Or is it graceful because I'm not causing problems? Or is it aggressive because I'm looking to score? I don't know. I'm overthinking this. You think you'd be good at shooting three-pointers? Yes, and that would be basically how I get paid if I get paid. So yeah, that would be my bread and butter. How would you react to enemy teams' taunts? It's one of those things where I think in theory I could be really good at trash talking, but I never actually did it in games because I can't really back it up on the court as well. So, if it were something where I were more able to like play defense and some of this other stuff, then I guess I'd be really good at talking shit. Um, yeah, I usually just kind of shrug. I don't get too worked up over that kind of stuff because I know it's just to try to get your goat and uh, get in your head, so not a big deal. The coach benches you, how do you react? Well, I've never played enough organized sports to really know how I'd react to that. I don't know. I have no idea. I've never been one to cheer a bunch, so I definitely wouldn't do the first one. I'm not one to beg. I'm not one to throw a fit, so I guess I'd have to give the coach a glare. Okay, what would your role in the team be? Well, it wouldn't be defending. I suck at that. I'm really fucking bad at rebounding. Really, not that great at passing. I sometimes have a good dime, but not often. Because weirdly, I can throw a lead pass, but I can't catch one. So, make of that what you will. I'd have to be scoring. That's pretty much what I do. I'm kind of a one-dimensional player, but I guess at least the one thing I'm good at, it directly contributes to winning the game, so there's that. Your team's down 2 points, there's 10 seconds left, what do you do? Go with what the coach planned or take the shot? Because I can't dunk it. I have maybe like a 2-inch vertical, so that's not going to happen. If somebody's open, I probably would pass it to them if they were good at shooting. But for the most part, of course it depends on who I'm playing with, but I mean, ideally I'm going to take the shot. I mean, that's basically what I'm there for. That's about the only thing I'm good at, so I might as well take the shot. All these other guys who've been hustling and getting rebounds on that shit, I mean, let them go get a putback dunk in case I miss, Night before the big game, sleeping, practicing, partying, or relaxing. Um, Probably relaxing. Want to make sure I'm in the right headspace and that I'm rested. So that'd probably be what I would choose to do. Which of these numbers would you have printed on your shirt? 30, 0, 23, or 13? But in this picture, they have a 7 highlighted. I don't really care what the number would be. I have no preference, really. The only numbers I used when I played um, rec ball in elementary school, I think I was 9 and I was 27 at one point. And neither of those is on here, so... I mean, I loved Michael Jordan as a kid. I might want to go with that, but I feel like every asshole tries to be 23 because of Jordan and LeBron, and then because of Curry, all the little kids try to be 30. I'll go with 13, represent Wilt Chamberlain from back in the day. I mean, 0 is basically Russell Westbrook. I'm not anything like Russell Westbrook. I don't think I'm that much like Wilt either, but, you know, at least I know my basketball history, so I'll be 13. If you were a player, what number would you have been drafted? Shit. I'd be undrafted. What are you talking about? I'd be like one of those guys who does a walk-on because, like, there was an injury apocalypse on the team. So I guess 7th is the closest to that concept. Which sneaker brand would sponsor you? Okay, so Jordan's, Nike, Reebok, and Adidas. Trying to think who would want, because I mean basically Jordan and Nike try to get super kind of mostly athletic players, with the exception of Kyrie, who this was one of those, and he's more of a skill guy. Um, I'm gonna go with Reebok. I don't know why, but Reebok just seems right. And I don't think I've owned very many pairs of Reebok shoes in my life, but yeah, I'm sure that's true of a lot of the athletes who end up getting sponsorships. I'm sure Steph Curry had never heard of Under Armour when they signed him up. So I'll go with Reebok. I feel like it'd be random. It'd be based on who would be willing to give me the most money, just like all the other guys who make that decision. And I feel like Reebok is probably the hardest up to get people to sign with them, so go with them. What color would you want in your uniform? Hmm. Uh, I go with blue, I guess. I don't really give a shit. Compared to your teammates slash friends, how tall are you? About average. Usually when I play in pickup games. Although there have been games I've played in where I've played with a bunch of short people and end up being the fucking center, which is weird. Because I definitely am not good at that. Which of these qualities do you lack on the court? Humor. No, I'm usually pretty chill. Humility. Sharing. Or dependability. I guess sharing, because like I said, I'm not a super good passer. So I guess that'd probably be the one. How do you feel about being asked to put into a video game? To be put into a video game, okay. It'd be kind of cool. I don't think I'd say it's the best thing ever because everybody gets in if you're in the league, but you know, it'd be kind of cool. I would be kind of pissed if they got my character wrong though, but I don't think I'd be one of those people who go on Twitter and like have an 18 post tweet storm about how they got my overall rating wrong. What's the best part of basketball? Scoring, winning, the teamwork, the cheerleaders. I mean, assuming that you're getting the cheerleaders, I mean, obviously, right? I mean, I don't think there's any real controversy with saying that. Why would you play basketball? To make money, for the perks, because it's what I love, for the glory. I'm trying to think back. So, like, when I was a little kid and I didn't know that I wasn't good enough to make it. Hmm. Had to be one of these two. Basically, both of these, I guess. I go with for the glory, though. That should be more fun in terms of who I end up getting at the end. All right. Which NBA great inspired you the most? Michael Jordan. Not a question. Uh, I didn't see Magic play. He was a little bit before my time. And Allen Iverson, that was during that period where I kind of stopped watching basketball, sort of after Jordan. I just kind of lost interest for a while. So most of the best of Allen Iverson was in that period. So I missed out on a lot of really good play. As for Shaq, I've never found Shaq to be all that impressive, honestly, just because he's just so much bigger than everybody. He just overpowers people. I don't find that all that impressive. It's kind of like me going to an elementary school and just playing bully ball against a bunch of little kids. I'm not impressed. What salary would you settle for the season? So this is like my bare minimum, I guess. Fuck, I'd take the minimum. Are you kidding? Is the minimum's 5 million now? I could play one season and be set forever. Okay. Which of these universities were you scouted from? Well, obviously, I have some history with this place, so I got to go with that. What music were you listening to before the match starts? I don't know who Rick Ross is. I don't know who Future is. So I guess it could be neither one of them. Uh, Drake and Jay-Z. I'm not really into like pop, hip hop kind of shit, so I don't know. Drake. What female celebrity are you hoping will have front row seats to your game? I don't know who Amber Rose is. Definitely not Khloe Kardashian. Every time she dates somebody, they end up on crack. Gabrielle Union is married to Dwayne Wade. So I guess I'll just go with Rihanna. I feel like just by process elimination, that's the correct answer there. East Coast or West Coast? Both? Well, yeah, I'll go with both. I mean, I'd be willing to do either one. I mean, yeah, if I'm getting paid millions of dollars to play basketball, shit, yeah. I actually have not spent much time on the West Coast at all, so I don't really know what it's like, but from what I gather, it seems pretty cool. California, which state would you want to play in? California, Florida, Georgia, or New York? I mean, California. After you retire from playing sports, what would your career be? Another sport, acting or reality TV, sports commentating or business? Probably sports commentating. I feel like I could probably do that. That wouldn't be a very hard transition. And hopefully I would play long enough that I'd be too old to actually play another sport. You know, if you have the long career, maximize that NBA money rather than going to play like handball or some bullshit like that. What's the most important person in your life? Uh, yeah, probably your partner, I would think. I don't have children, so that's not an option. And yeah, there you go. What would the media call you? Family man, player, the king, a joker? I don't know. I feel like those are some very limiting options. I mean, a joker isn't a person who's a joke, a person who makes a lot of jokes, or a person who's a wild card. Either way, maybe that would work. I don't know. What kind of sports-related scandal would you be involved with? Okay. Alright, now we're in some good shit here. Cheating with the cheerleader? Maybe. Beating up another player? Maybe. Doping? No. Being involved with a teammate's girlfriend or wife? Maybe. Uh, I feel like I probably wouldn't do the Derek Fisher and Matt Barnes thing. So, I'll go with the cheerleaders. Keep with the theme from earlier. If you were a basketball player, how would you wear your hair? Buzz cut, bald, short, and an afro. Short, I guess. Probably wouldn't really do anything too special. I guess if I was a pro, it'd be like, hey, you gotta change your hairstyle. You gotta get the $500 haircut. James Harden, huh? Best beard, I've got a beard. James Edward Harden. Amazing player, everyone knows it. Scored over 600 points during 7-year career. He scored more than 600 points. Sixth man of the year. Oh, so this is before he was famous. This must be an old quiz because he's been MVP since this was made. But yeah, I'm cool with James Harden. James Harden is a good player. When was this made? I don't know. So anyway, I guess I'm James Harden. So yeah, there's that. Yeah, there we go. So anyway, but yeah, so what else are people talking about while I was gone? I did taekwondo as a kid. I was not that good. Woody Harrelson, maybe so. Like the guy from the Will Ferrell movie, yeah. What point did the Byzantine Empire stop favoring small landholders and allow the aristocracy to become overpowered? It's a very controversial question, Taco. A lot of disagreement on that. Um, it looks like that really came into play after Basil II was dead and gone. And a lot of that is because the emperors needed to gain support by trying to keep the aristocrats happy, so they loosened up controls on land laws and allowed the peasants to get exploited. Okay, so moving on to our next activity. So one thing I forgot to mention at the outset, we're doing another book giveaway. The book giveaway is back. So, whoever is the high dollar donor of the evening will be receiving a book. And there will be two choices for the book. One is Material Culture in the Far East. The other one is Intellectual Culture in the Ancient West. That's all the detail I'll provide, but both of them are good books, and one of them is an extra of a book that I have on my shelf. The other one is something that I just finished and that I am ready to move on. So, those are your choices. One comment that I saw much earlier before I began the stream is something that I'd like to touch upon again. When we went over the Bush presidency last time, there were a few things I left unsaid, and a few things we didn't go into. So I'd like to maybe do a bit of backtracking to the last stream before we move into some of the bigger events of today. Ancient West is in Greece. Talking about West in that capital W civilization sense. So, somebody asked, how did Bush influence my political development? Because I came of age during the Bush years. Well, in a lot of ways, so growing up, I didn't really have much of a political affiliation. My family's pretty apolitical. I mean, my grandparents, one side is more Democratic, one side is more Republican, but, you know, they weren't really super into it. They weren't activists, and my parents weren't really political at all. And then 9/11 happens, and like a lot of people, at first I thought that Bush was really keeping us safe and all that stuff because that was what was on the news at the time. So for a couple years or so, I thought Bush was doing a pretty good job. I was a teenager, so what did I know? And then the Iraq War buildup started. Not the war itself, but the buildup. So remember, we'd have these discussions in my history class. I think that was still a world history class at the time because I didn't take government until the next year. So that was what was happening that year, and we were talking about whether Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. I mean, I assumed naturally that because the government was saying that they had weapons of mass destruction, they must. Why would they make something like that up? It was inconceivable to me that somebody would make something like that up, or completely fabricate evidence in this way. So, as time went on, and as the invasion happened, at first I thought, well, I guess we have to do this. I mean, I know that this could be bad. Obviously, people have been predicting that invading Iraq would turn into a quagmire for a while. That was something I was aware of. So I figured there might be something to that. I was I was sort of worried about it, but I thought, well, maybe these guys know what they're doing. And then it turns out, what is it, like 6 months into the war, no evidence of weapons of mass destruction. And also the UN's weapons inspector, Hans Blix, or whatever his name was, the German guy, said, yeah, I was there the whole time. We never found any evidence of weapons of mass destruction. So it became abundantly clear, oh fuck, Bush lied. Colin Powell went to the UN and lied. All these people are liars. And that was a tough moment. That was a tough moment to realize that it was possible for the government to lie. Because up to that point, I figured that Nixon had been some sort of weird anomaly in history. That presidents weren't supposed to lie. That's just something that you set aside for 4 to 8 years when you became president. That you put this responsibility, this weighty responsibility, ahead of whatever personal bullshit you had going on. And so learning that Bush lied about the weapons of mass destruction to get us into a war, that really disabused me of any real sense of idealism in terms of thinking that the presidents were better than some arbitrary standard that we might hold in our imaginations. So it definitely made me more cynical living under the Bush years. Fast forward some, we get to the later part of the Bush presidency. So actually, no, now we get to the 2004 election cycle. So at this point, I don't like Bush. Safe to say. And also, at some point around this time, I looked into his domestic agenda, because that's something I'd never really thought much about, were domestic politics. And then I learned what he was for, including privatizing Social Security. Now, at this time, two of my great-grandmothers were still alive. Both of them were in their late 70s or early 80s by this point. Both of them had been retired for a while, had health problems, so there's no way they could go out and work or anything like that. And so I knew that if their Social Security were to be privatized or cut, that it would be disastrous, and that then my grandparents would have to try to foot the bill entirely. But they were already doing a lot for them because their Social Security payments were not very generous. Neither of them had been the primary breadwinner, and because they had been their husbands had predeceased them, a lot of that income was gone now. So they were living fairly minimally, fairly frugally, and then my grandparents were having to give them money on the sly, sometimes without them knowing it, by the way. Sometimes they'd just put money in their accounts, and then they would just be like, oh, well, I guess I'm better at managing money than I realized. So, yeah, I knew that was something that would be a huge fuck up if Bush were to do that. So, big problem there. And then the 2004 election starts, and so at first you have the primary, where I was originally in the Howard Dean. I kind of got disillusioned with that. Then I started looking at the Bush campaign, and I'm looking at the dumb shit he's running on. So not only is it the notion that Bush kept us safe, the Democrats won't. Well, how did 9/11 happen? And then, it was basically a big gay bashing campaign. And at this point, I don't really know if I knew any gay people. So I'm like, what's the point of any of this? There aren't that many gay people, and if they go and fuck each other in the ass, that's not going to impact the world in any way. It's not like they're not going to do that because it's illegal. I mean, clearly, homosexuality is naturally occurring, so who gives a shit? So that was my perspective at the time. I know a lot of people had a more moralistic view of it, but for me, it was just a matter of, what possible difference does this make? How does this make you feel better about yourself to go and demonize a group of people you don't know? What the fuck? And also, we've got plenty of major problems, including a war in Iraq that's going to shit. And you're going to try to stop dudes from having sex with each other. I mean, somewhere the priorities got scrambled. Something's wrong with this picture. So I started looking for other candidates to vote for, because Kerry did not do it for me. Kerry, I thought, was just promising to do the same thing as Bush. You know, I don't want those things to be done. So actually, at one point, I actually flirted with libertarianism, because I thought, if our options are Bush or Bush Light, then, hey, how about we just minimize the government? I'll do the libertarian thing. And then I looked into that guy, not so much. Anyway, so after the 2004 cycle, I sort of figured out that cultural politics in general is bullshit, because I look back at the gay marriage issue. That was clearly something Bush wasn't that serious about. I learned later that Dick Cheney vehemently opposed it, and that's what caused them to split with each other. We'll talk more about Dick in a minute. Dick Cheney, that is, not Dick. So, cultural politics, I learned from that point forward, the hard way, are nothing more than a distraction. So it's not that these people are dumb or weird or whatever, obsessive over obscenely dumb things. It is that they are taking advantage of other people being obsessive and weird and dumb. So that was something that it took me a couple years to process after seeing it. And I didn't know what identity politics was at that time in terms of the term, So I didn't learn that until I took a political science class a couple years afterwards, but I kind of knew the concept. And based on the way that Bush and his supporters would frame things, where they denounce everything as either commie or queer or whatever, I always thought of identity politics as commie and queer politics, meaning that you use smears to try to degrade and make unacceptable whatever it is you disagree with. So yeah, that's kind of how Bush influenced a lot of my early political development. And then I also read um, The Wrecking Crew by what's it, Thomas Frank, which is about the Bush administration and the Bush years. And I also read Naomi Klein's The Shock Doctrine. These are both right as Bush was about to go out of office, in terms of when I read them, and also kind of when they were written too. And so basically, what I discovered is that it wasn't just my perception that Bush literally was governing in a way to try to destroy the state. That was the goal in many ways, was to privatize this for private gain. So there you go. And I guess at that point, that's about when Bush left office. I kept developing. We'll talk about, I guess I'll talk more about my political development under the Obama years, because there were some significant things that happened, especially in the early part of Obama's presidency, at least in terms of my personal development. But yeah, a whole lot of how I came to be who I am politically is due to Bush. And I know it's interesting because a whole lot of other people who were either apolitical or even started out Republican ended up becoming very left wing because of the failures of the Bush years. So if you look at the people who were born from, say, like 85 to 87 or so, so the people who are basically the same exact age I am, that is the most liberal group in American politics because we all came of age right when Bush was really fucking shit up. When we really saw the worst possible instantiation of the Republican Party. Alright, let's scroll back just a second ago. Yeah, the Swift boat thing was fucking sickening. Sean is not here. Um, he is out tonight doing stuff. Okay, Jack Griffin, 1999. Thank you, sir. Serious question. Please give more of an answer than the Churchill quote. Oh, you mean the democracy is the it might not whatever, I forget the exact quote, but something like democracy isn't perfect, but it's the least worst system or something like that, right? Well, I believe in democracy if you see so many problems with it. I'm no monarchist or dictator lover, but I stopped believing so many people are selfish, uninformed. Well, in a democracy, you do have rule of law, something that does not necessarily apply to a dictatorship or a monarchy. And so, there is a higher floor in a democracy than there is in a monarchy. What I mean by that is that there are certain freedoms that you can enjoy that can help offset the overall incompetence. And I think that actually is something. So, to me, that is justification enough if we're looking for a minimum level. But also in a democracy, and also because it has a rule of law, this also means that improvement is possible without bloodshed, which is key. So you can make reforms without resorting to violence for the most part. In a monarchy or a dictatorship, well, guess what? If you have a mad king, you pretty much have to overthrow him by force. And because he starts out with a monopoly on force, this means that the side that is trying to make a change has a very good chance of simply losing and then all dying, or winning, but winning a Pyrrhic victory. So I think that no matter how corrupt or incompetent a democracy might be at times, it is still preferable to a dictatorship or a monarchy. And I mean, the problems I see are not necessarily with democracy as such. A lot of them are more specific, and a lot of them are more with our system at the moment. And for instance, I've criticized the late Roman Republic quite a bit on this channel in recent days. I don't consider that to be democratic. So, just to be clear. And yeah, a lot of people are selfish and uninformed, but The problem is if you have a monarchy, an oligarchy, or a dictatorship, there's a good chance that some of the same people who are selfish and uninformed will be in charge and then have a lot of power without anybody there to rein them in. So spreading out the power as much as possible can at least raise the floor some. But good question. Taco Cruiser, $2. Why did Bush invade Iraq? Oil. Very simple. He wanted to get the oil. That's what it was all about. In class one time, when I was an undergrad, I referred to the Second Iraq War as the Halliburton War. And the professor said that it was too provocative to say that, but he couldn't actually disagree with it. Because we all know what the fuck the war was fought over. So, somebody said the politicization of the military. Yes, that's true. That actually began under Clinton, though. We talked about that in the Clinton video, where the Republicans played into blaming the Democrats for downsizing the military after the Cold War. Bush tried to play that up a lot, talked about being the troops' choice, all of that, did a lot of photo ops with the troops, pushed for flag pins. Troop culture became big at that time. But then because he fucked up the war so bad, well, he kind of destroyed that single-handedly for himself, even while trying to take advantage of it. And as for Dick Cheney, Darth Dick, as I like to think of him, very influential in the first term. We didn't talk about him much. He was because he was in charge of Bush's vice presidential selection committee, and then Bush liked him when they were talking. Whether Cheney was angling for the job or not, I can't say, but certainly he ended up getting it and accepted it. And in many ways, he was largely running the show in the first term, especially prior to and immediately after 9/11, because Bush was totally shell-shocked, and Cheney, though, much steadier hand, the kind of guy who's very bloody-minded. Whatever else you might say about him, I mean, Dick Cheney's not the kind of guy to get upset at bloodshed, so he's the kind of guy who'd be like, commit the troops, So, Cheney had a huge influence on Bush's thinking, especially going into Iraq, some other decisions. They fell out starting in 2004 because Cheney had a gay daughter, Liz Cheney, who's now a prominent member of Congress, and he did not want to use the demonization of gay strategy, so that created some tension between Bush and Cheney. They also fell out over a couple other things I can't recall at the moment, but by the end of Bush's second term, Darth Dick was on the outs. And it also didn't help that Rumsfeld got sent home, because Rumsfeld and Cheney were good friends. And apparently, the correct pronunciation is Cheney, not Cheney. Even everybody says Cheney. But, he only has like 5 neighbors in all of Wyoming, so it's not like too many people know that anyway, right? Doesn't matter. But yeah, also Dick Cheney famously shot a man in the face, by the way. And best part of the story that I can never get over, not only did he shoot a man in the face while they were hunting together for quail, which is in an enclosure, so it's not like there's any real danger or any reason to be hasty, but when he shot the man in the face, a man who gave him money on the regular for his campaigns, that guy, with buckshot in his face while he's in the hospital, a 70-plus-year-old man, publicly apologized to Dick Cheney for getting shot in the face by Dick Cheney. That's how nefarious Dick Cheney was. And I think that tells you pretty much all you need to know about the man. And of course, he had deep connections with Halliburton. Halliburton did fantastically well in Iraq in terms of getting contracts, even though they did create showers which electrocuted soldiers to death, among other things. So there you go. The Karl Rove have a lot of influence on policy. Taco Cruiser for $2. I don't think so, Taco. I don't really know, though. Karl Rove is not a policy-driven guy. From what I understand, he's more about just getting Republicans elected in the purest sense. So I can't say with 100% certainty what Karl Rove's exact influence is on day-to-day basis and on actual policy, but my guess would be not much. He probably does influence messaging very heavily, though. That's something that he would think about much more so than, say, what the tax rate should be or something like that. He would just say, we need to lower it because that's what Republicans want. However you lower it, the nerds can figure that out. I'm not doing that. Okay, Jack Griffin, 999. Sort of what I envision is a system in which merit grants more political rights. Pure meritocracy, sure, more authoritarian, but I'm not pro-dictator. I ask why no one thinks about something new, innovate. Well, I think the reason is that when you start trying to lay out a system like that, the problem that you run into is, how does one determine merit? Is there an objective measure for merit? Could you use an IQ test? Are IQ tests accurate, though? Does that really pull in all of your intelligence? How about something that's based more on achievement? Your level of education, but are all degrees equal? Are all universities equal? Does that really reflect on your value to society, though? Your level of education or your IQ score? Or do you base it on... What do you base it on, right? Income? Well, we know that there are a lot of jobs that pay really well that don't necessarily contribute to the betterment of society or that don't even require, in relative terms, as much skill as some other jobs. So, how do we determine pure merit? That's why meritocracy breaks down as a political system. The Romans had what they thought was a meritocracy. It was based on winning honors. So if you win offices over and over, you get more and more merit and auctoritas. The problem is then, though, what actually gets you to the point where you earn these merits that you claim? Well, it ends up being wealth. Because you have to be fabulously wealthy to run for office in the first place. So unless you're born very wealthy, you can't attain merit. So my general point, though, is that you can't really have a pure meritocracy like what you're talking about until you can firmly establish what merit is, until everybody agrees that this form of merit is the most valid, and that this should really determine one's place in the political order in a way which hopefully produces political benefits for all by having the people with the most merit at the top making the decisions. But yeah, determining who has merit, that's the sticky point. And there are some people who just define it as people with merit agree with me, people without merit don't. And obviously that's problematic and obviously biased and not usable. So yeah, the system by which you determine merit really is the pivot point, and I don't think there's a way to get beyond that. So somebody is here looking for women, but the problem is I've looked at the demographics of my channel, and that's going to be a long, hard search, buddy, so not the right stream. Okay, now, I guess we can move into the main event of the evening. And I decided to do this one tonight because Sean has said repeatedly that this is one that he will never do. He believes it is beneath his dignity. But it's not beneath mine, though. So what we're going to do is take a look at the the top 10 worst American Civil War generals, according to top10s.net. And this was published on May 24th, 2009. There's no author given. Let's see if we can scroll down and find one. But what that tells me is that this was written sort of rapidly by somebody who did not want to go on the record as holding these opinions because he did not put any effort into it. No, excuse me. Oh, no. This was written by David Hurlbert, PhD. Holy shit. Because I've previewed this before. I've never actually gone into it, but I know that from what is here, my memory of it, that this is not a well-written or reasoned piece. So let's figure out who David Hurlburt is. Let's try PhD. He could be this guy who passed away in 2015. Although I doubt it. Like, why would some super old dude... Well, he's not that old, though. He'd be the same age as my grandpa, except my grandpa was... No. He's way younger than my grandpa. My grandpa was born in 1939, and he's still alive. This could be the guy. Let's see. He's got a PhD in something. Veteran of the Army, bachelor's degree, sociology, and a PhD from Tulane. I assume this is the right guy. I don't know. Sorry to hear that you've died of cancer, David, but assuming that you are the same author of this piece, I can't go easy on you just because you had a rough ending there. This piece was total shit. But I wish you were still around so you could hear my critiques of your piece. So, R.I.P., buddy. Okay. I'm stunned that this man had a PhD, but just based on what I remember from reading this, because a lot of this is fairly ridiculous. I wish I knew what his degree was actually in, though, but that was not available. I assume it's sociology. And then he ends up writing an article for Top Tens about worst Civil War generals. Okay, sure, whatever. Alright. The 10th worst general of the American Civil War is Hugh Judson Kilpatrick of the USA. So he does USA and CSA, which is a slightly odd way to do it since most people do not recognize the sovereignty of the Confederacy. But we'll let that stand as it is, who cares? General Kilpatrick was known for his reckless disregard for the lives of those soldiers under his command, and his performance at Gettysburg bordered on criminal behavior, with Elon Farnsworth paying the price. His raid on Richmond under the pretext of freeing Union prisoners was a joke that cost the life of Colonel Ulrich Dahlgren. When General Kilpatrick commanded his cavalry in parades or battle, and they looked quite professional. However, his camp was another story. Kilpatrick's lack of proper discipline resulted in his camps being unkempt, disorderly, and embedded with prostitutes. So, fun? But, no, that was actually pretty common in the war from what I understand. And again, I'm not Sean, so I don't know all the details of how camps were usually kept, but I don't think super tight camp discipline is ever the norm when you have an army that's mostly conscripts. If you have a professional army, that's a different story, but this was not a professional force. In July of 1863, at the Battle of Gettysburg, Kilpatrick, in command of his cavalry, was later accused of using poor judgment when he ordered a devastating charge on July 3rd. In an effort to repair the damage to his reputation caused that day, and in anticipation of post-war political aspirations, he planned a raid on Richmond, Virginia in 1864. His plan was to attack the Confederate capital, cause as much devastation as possible, and free the Union soldiers held prisoner there. On March 1st, while en route to implement this plan, he lost his nerves at the gates of Richmond and retreated. So, just based on all the people we've talked about and all of the streams on the Civil War, the case seems to come down to this guy occasionally liked to use prostitutes. He made a bad decision at Gettysburg where there were many bad decisions made. And his ambitious plan to raid Richmond under the nose of the Confederates didn't quite work out. I don't know if that's really top 10 material. Now, I know that this guy has the nickname Kill Cavalry and that he's not the best commander by any stretch of the imagination, but in terms of getting into the bottom 10, I just don't know if the case is strong enough here. That being said, there are lots of candidates who could possibly make it to this list, who would be arguable enough, but yeah, I just don't think that this is a super strong case. And also, he's naming random colonels as the reason why he got this random colonel killed. What an asshole. As if the average reader knows who Ulrich Dahlgren is. I mean, granted, I cry every single night for Ulrich Dahlgren, and I wonder how history would have been different had he lived, but, that's just me, of course. Okay, and now we get the one who definitely should not be on this list. William S. Rosecrans, USA. Appointed commander of the Army of the Cumberland in October 1862, General Rosecrans almost lost the Battle of Stones River. He didn't, though. He won. And then waited almost 6 months to engage an enemy of a much smaller force. Referred to by General McClellan as a silly, fussy goose, it did seem to accurately predict General Rosecrans' military future as a commanding officer. His flawed strategy during the Tullahoma campaign only succeeded due to the drastic mistakes of his opponent. Rather than consolidate his position in Chattanooga, he opted to move through the passes in Lookout Mountain. When he came out with the mountain to his back, he fought the Battle of Chickamauga, the worst Union loss in the Civil War. Trapped in Chattanooga, he did little to relieve the suffering of his men. When General Grant relieved him of duty, he had fewer than 5 days' rations remaining, with his troops already being on half rations. Also problematic was his propensity to micromanage the movements of units instead of relying on his chain of command. Finally, he was accused of disgracefully leaving the battlefield at Chickamauga, and he was relieved of duty. Okay, so basically, this takes up the Grant version of the war, where Grant was the only good general and all the other Union guys were completely moronic and cowardly and incapable. But a lot of the case against Rosecrans here is that he didn't find an opening at Tullahoma, which was a difficult, complicated campaign and maneuver. So possibly he had a missed opportunity. So that's why he's terrible. And also McClellan doesn't like him, neither does Grant. And then he lost at Chickamauga. But remember, at Chickamauga, what happened, Longstreet's corps arrives unexpectedly. The Union did not predict that happening. The battle was already underway when Longstreet joined. So this was a surprise for the Union forces. And from what I understand, too, I think that the Union under Rosecrans was not getting as many supplies as they should have because of the railroad setup. So things were not ideal at Chickamauga. And while Chattanooga falling would have been a major setback, the fact is that he did keep his army together and prevented this from becoming a full-blown catastrophe. And Chickamauga was not a decisive victory for the Confederacy. They lost more men than the Union did. So the case here just doesn't work for me. I don't think Rosecrans is a military genius or anything like that, but he's certainly not bottom 10. There are a lot of people that are significantly worse than Rosecrans. So I would definitely not include him on this list if I were making a bottom 10 list. Let's check in on you guys and make sure you can still hear me and everything. All right. Jefferson. All right. Taco Cruiser, was Jefferson Davis a competent leader? That's more of a Sean question. Personally, I'm not inclined to think that he was that great of a leader. One thing he did do that was fairly competent, I guess you could say, is that he got most of the governors to cooperate by giving him troops. Whereas many of the governors, under their understanding of the Confederate Constitution, thought that they could hold back large numbers of men and not really cooperate with the central government. Jefferson Davis was fairly effective at getting them to cooperate with the national war effort. So I guess in that sense, he was a fairly competent leader. Anything else about Jeff Davis? Well, he was pretty bad at picking generals. Aside from that, I don't really have super strong opinions about Jeff Davis. I mean, that's, like I said, that's more of a Sean question. So, yeah, you should probably ask him next time he's around. And somebody, Jay Bird's talking about how this guy is heavily slanted toward the Confederacy. I think you're probably right. It's beginning to look that way. I'm seeing a lot of Northern generals on this list as we move down. So, this guy could be a lost causer. There's that chance, which makes this more fun. Okay, next up is number 8, Don Carlos Buell. This is another guy, I really don't know what the case could possibly be here to put him on the bottom 10. Because he saved the day at Shiloh, which is a pretty big deal by anyone's standards. General Buell led 4 divisions along the Memphis and Charleston Railroad toward Chattanooga while repairing the line. With his supply line destroyed by Confederate cavalry, his movement came to a halt. With Bragg's invasion of Kentucky, General Buell was forced to fall back north to protect the line of the Ohio River. Dissatisfied with his progress, the authorities ordered him to turn over command to George H. Thomas on September 30th, 1862, but the next day this order was revoked. On October 8th, he fought the indecisive Battle of Perryville, which halted a Confederate invasion that was already faltering. He failed, however, to pursue the retreating enemy, and for this was relieved of his command on October 24th, 1862. And how's that bottom 10? The guy was clearly not very politically well connected. Again, remember, earlier that year in April, he had saved Grant at Shiloh. So a major battle. Here, this is a secondary front. He was not able to quite invade Tennessee. He did defend Kentucky. And while this was a sloppy defense, the invasion on the Confederates' part was also pretty sloppy. Perryville was an encounter battle. There was acoustic shadowing, or whatever it's called, where you can't really hear gunfire that's not that far away. And so 2 wings of each army collided with one another, and the main bodies were unaware until they were informed by messenger. So Buell's lack of a pursuit is understandable, given that the guy had to figure out what the hell had happened. And because he was almost relieved anyway, it should come as no surprise that the authorities were looking for just one more excuse to sack him and get rid of him. And that's what happened. So Buell was basically eliminated for political reasons. Now, he showed no signs of military genius, but at the same time, he's not bottom 10. He has no grand defeat on his record. He just had a little bit of clumsy handling in Kentucky. So what? Alright, Gideon Pillow, CSA. So this is a guy who got his ass kicked by Grant. I'm also beginning to see a heavy Grant bias here, where basically 2 guys that Grant doesn't like have already made the list, and now a guy that Grant kicked the shit out of is on the list. Suspended from command by order of Jefferson Davis for grave errors in judgment in the military operations which resulted in the surrender of the army at Fort Donelson. Despite his advantages at Fort Donelson, General Pillow's inexplicable decisions led him to an embarrassing defeat. In his memoirs regarding the Battle of Fort Donelson in February 1862, General Grant wrote of his Confederate foe, "I had known General Pillow in Mexico, and judged that with any force, no matter how small, I could march up to within gunshot of any entrenchment he was given to hold." His decision to flee to fort, leaving the onerous task of capitulation to General Buckner, would tarnish his reputation beyond repair, and for the rest of his life he would carry the taint of a failure made worse by the abandonment of his own men. Yeah, Pillow was pretty terrible at Fort Donelson, that is true, and the command situation was extremely complicated. Buckner was there, and I believe there was a former governor of Virginia there. Maybe, was that Wise, or one of those guys? Complete shit show in terms of organization. I don't know if Pillow had any real advantages in the battle, but certainly he made very poor use of whatever advantages he did have. He's a good candidate to be here, actually. I support him being on this list. I don't know how high he should be, because I guess we'll have to see who else is available here, and maybe also furnish some new candidates, but yeah, Pillow sucked. Alright, one of Sean's favorites, Nathaniel Prentice Banks of the USA. In the Shenandoah Valley, General Banks lost 30% of his troops when he was routed by Stonewall Jackson, and due to his tremendous loss of supplies was dubbed Commissary Banks by the Confederates. As part of Pope's army, he was defeated at Cedar Mountain again by Jackson in the disastrous Red River campaign, as well as the Second Bull Run. That is a fucked up sentence. As a part of Pope's army, he was defeated at Cedar Mountain again by Jackson. No, Jackson was not at the Red River. The Red River is in Louisiana. That had nothing to do with Jackson. So, Banks was at Cedar Mountain in Second Bull Run. I don't know for sure if he was. I'm going to assume he was, though. But Red River is where Banks was on his own as a commander, and he failed horribly. He was up against a massively inferior force and somehow lost. Either that or he won but suffered horrible casualties. I think that's what happened, right? He defeated the Confederates technically, but he had a massive advantage. He barely made any progress. He lost a ton of men for no reason. Anyway, after a brief stint in the capital's defenses, he went to New Orleans to replace Benjamin F. Butler. His operations against Port Hudson were met with several bloody repulses, eventually falling only after the surrender of Vicksburg made it untenable. Banks belongs here. I know Sean would probably put him number 1 in terms of incompetent generals of the Civil War. And yeah, I think that Banks definitely belongs here. And he's another guy who is a purely political general. He should not have been given chance after chance, but he was. And he did very little to justify the faith put in him. Next up, Franz Sigel. General Sigel opened up the Valley campaigns of 1864, launching an invasion of the Shenandoah Valley, in which he was severely defeated by General Breckinridge at the Battle of New Market on May 15, 1864. This battle was particularly embarrassing due to the prominent role young cadets from the Virginia Military Institute played, and he was relieved of his command for lack of aggression and replaced by General David Hunter. This was very well edited, by the way. Because I know there are a few passages, I was afraid I was fucking it up while I was reading it, but now that I really look very carefully at the text, there are lots and lots of typos here. So Top Tens apparently did no editing. So I imagine that this guy, who presumably had published in a journal or two, was used to having editors around. And so they just said, well, this guy's got a PhD, there's no way he'd make typos, let's just publish this shit without reading it. Because the fact is, everyone makes typos, and you have to do editing, no matter who you are. But apparently Top Tens, being the fount of intellectual greatness that it is, decided, nah, dog. We're good. We spell tens with a Z. You don't have to spell anything right here. He was unable to shake the reality that he was defeated by a charge of young Virginia Military Institute cadets, and his military aspirations ended abruptly, serving the rest of the war without any active commands. New Market was not a huge deal, really. At least not so far as I'm aware, except in kind of the neo-Lost Cause tradition. It was a pretty small battle, not that big of a setback, and I don't really get what is so humiliating about losing to cadets, because think about it, these cadets are all highly motivated, they're all young, mostly healthy men, in a war where you need all the bodies you can get. So these guys are not necessarily worse equipped for war than the soldiers under Sigel. And if you look at a lot of Civil War cemeteries, you'll notice that a lot of the privates are in their 40s. So you're telling me that a bunch of like 18-year-olds who are studying war professionally are less fit for duty than a bunch of guys in their 40s who were called out of factories and farms to go down south and fight the Confederates. I'm not buying it. I don't think there's any humiliation involved with getting beaten by cadets. These are also grown men. So what's the point here? As far as Sigel being top 10 worst, from what I recall, maybe. He certainly did a shit job in the Valley. I believe he was not very effective as a corps commander either. His one saving grace is that he was popular with the German troops, so he managed to help them recruit a lot of men. And I guess you're talking about overall contributions and bringing stuff to the table. Just because of him bringing in a bunch of German recruits, I don't think he could possibly be all that low necessarily. I mean, maybe he can be like the 10th worst, but he can't be like top 5, I would say, just because he does bring in recruits. So that helps to offset his incompetence. But I'm not, yeah, I think I'm okay with him being here. I think he belongs on a list like this, or at least as an honorable mention. He's adjacent to something like this, I would say. Okay, number 4 is Braxton Bragg of the CSA. Now, I know Bragg is somebody that Sean doesn't think was all that bad or incompetent, really, compared to what most people think. I actually kind of disagree. I think that Bragg was pretty shit. General Bragg's problems were legendary on the battlefield. He lacked the ability to communicate with his generals. This problem was magnified by his chronic indecisiveness. His march to Kentucky, touted by some as a strategic masterpiece, was little more than a pathetic attempt to protect General Smith's flank from General Buell. He simply assumed William S. Rosecrans would not attack once his force had been routed at Stone's River. It took him 2 days to discover the enemy was advancing on his position at Tullahoma. Then he chose to obey an order over 6-month-old, retreating to Chattanooga. There, it took only a brigade of men to fool him into a full retreat from that city. So here's a massive contradiction. So remember how the case against Rosecrans is that he really fucked up at Tullahoma? But he got Bragg to abandon a major position without a fight. So how did Rosecrans fail massively if Bragg gave up a major position and he didn't? So there you go. Major contradiction already. Okay, so we already read that. After Chickamauga, he refused to destroy the Army of the Cumberland in spite of the sound advice of Generals Forrest and Longstreet. Refused to destroy? I think it's more that he didn't press the assault because his men had suffered more losses than the enemy. His army wasn't in great condition. Now, I think that perhaps he would have been better served to have a more vigorous pursuit, but I actually understand why he wouldn't. That doesn't make him a complete moron to say, I should not take my battered army and try to hurl it in the battle again. At Missionary Ridge, he grossly misplaced his line and blamed his men for the loss. Yeah, he fucked up at that battle. Another one where he fucks up that a lot of people don't realize or talk about is at Bentonville, where he was made a wing commander under Joseph E. Johnston. This is the last battle that the Army of Tennessee fought. And Braxton Bragg was so bad in this battle that he did not deploy his wing of the army. So his wing of the army, which could have engaged, didn't. So yeah, Bragg, I think, belongs on a top 10 list. Exactly where he places, I don't know. But yeah, he belongs on the list. He's a good choice. Next up is Ambrose Everett Burnside, USA. Every time I see the USA, I think of the effect in Street Fighter 2 where you go to Guile stage and it'll be like, USA! And then you get the music and then you see him fighting in front of his F-16. So anyway, General Burnside's leadership fiasco at Antietam allowed General A.P. Hill's Confederate division to come up from Harper's Ferry and contain the Union breakthrough. He is also the chief architect of the futile, murderous assaults at Fredericksburg, leader of the ill-fated Mud March, and his obvious failure at Petersburg where he bungled the follow-up to the explosion of the mine. In reaction to this failure, he was sent on leave and never recalled. He finally resigned on April 15, 1865. He also fought at the Wilderness in Spotsylvania, where his poor leadership continued to be exemplified, appearing reluctant to commit his troops after the Fredericksburg experience. Burnside was pretty bad. Fredericksburg was a huge catastrophe, especially the assault on Maurice's Heights. And the Petersburg operation, it was pretty innovative. I would have to give him credit for that. He showed some creativity and used his engineering skills. He didn't have enough grip on the battle, though. He allowed the command to fall to the alcoholic General Ledlie, and he didn't insist upon using the USCT, who were trained for the operation because of political considerations that it would look like the Union was callously sending black people to go die. So I think if he had held his ground, if he had chosen a better commander and possibly pushed for the inclusion of at least some of the USCT, that he could have pulled off a lot more during the Battle of the Crater. But he didn't. So Burnside, I think, belongs here, although I put him probably in the 6 to 10 area rather than the top 5. I mean, Fredericksburg is really bad, though, so I could see possibly justifying top 5 for that, but yeah, I'm probably thinking 6 to 10 for someone like Burnside. Alright, number 2. Worse than Burnside, worse than Bragg, George Brenton McClellan. The master of overestimation and slow movement. He constantly proclaimed himself the savior of the Union, yet seemed unwilling to fight. At Antietam, he had his opponent's battle plans and still could not win. Tommy Franks, speaking to U.S. soldiers, and by the way, Tommy Franks, I think, was a former commander-in-chief in Iraq, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe Afghanistan, I can't remember, but he is a U.S. general of recent vintage. Or was he chief of staff? Anyway, the point is, Tommy Franks is a very high-ranking American general of recent vintage. I will avoid the McClellan strategy of sit and wait here, and will employ those tactics of Cleburne, repulsing the enemy from the heart of Iraq. Safely entrenched at Harrison's Landing, General McClellan began condemning the War Department, Lincoln, and Stanton, blaming them for the defeat. Finally, it was decided in Washington to abandon the campaign and transfer most of his men to John Pope's army in northern Virginia. There were charges that McClellan, now called by the press Mac the Unready, and the little corporal of unsought fields, was especially slow in cooperating. So yeah, McClellan did mess up the Peninsula campaign. He also lost his nerve during the 7 Days campaign because he thought Lee's army was a horde, whereas in reality his army was actually larger than Lee's. So McClellan is not a great general. He also could have destroyed Lee at Antietam, where Lee was in a fucking terrible position, not to mention having his orders exposed, but also just chose a completely incompetent defensive position that left him trapped the small army of only, 30,000 or so. So, yeah, McClellan has his faults, and I could see definitely putting him in the 6 to 10 range. But he also was a really good organizer and trainer. And for the defeats that he did suffer, those defeats, while they were opportunities missed, he didn't exactly expose DC or something like that. And none of his armies were wiped out completely or anything of that nature. So, just in terms of degrees of failure, he definitely can't be number 2. There's no way he's that high. I mean, let's look at the people above him, who supposedly are better. Burnside, God no. Bragg, fuck no. Sigel, no. Banks, fuck no. Pillow, fuck no. When we get to Buell and Rosecrans, I would make the argument that, I don't know, I would say McClellan's better than Kilpatrick too. I don't think he's better than Rosecrans. I think Rosecrans is probably more capable than McClellan overall. Buell, I'm not entirely sure. Buell strikes me as kind of a fairly mediocre general who at least can fight but doesn't necessarily have a lot of great ideas. So maybe Buell and McClellan are about on a level in terms of ability. McClellan clearly failed more, though. So McClellan, yeah, I could see him being like number 9 or 10, but he should not be number 2. There's no fucking way. And finally, in the number 1 position, Benjamin Franklin Butler. USA! The nickname Beast of New Orleans was bestowed on the general, and Confederate President Jefferson Davis declared him to be an outlaw to be executed when caught. General Butler was so detested in the South that long after the war, chamber pots with Butler's portrait in the bottom were found in many Southern homes. Those are still sold, by the way, in New Orleans. Sean showed me a place where you can buy them even today. In the conduct of tactical operations in Virginia, Butler was almost uniformly unsuccessful. His first action at the Battle of Big Bethel was a humiliating defeat. Furthermore, at Petersburg, rather than immediately striking as ordered, General Butler's offensive bogged down east of Richmond in the area now called Bermuda Hundred, immobilized by the greatly inferior force of Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard, and he was unable to accomplish any of his assigned objectives. But it was his mismanagement of the expedition against Fort Fisher in North Carolina that finally led to his recall by General Grant in December. So Butler is a bad general, I will give you that. He resigned his commission on November 30th, 1865. The man's face found a home at the bottom of urinals in New Orleans. He was a failure at Big Bethel. A fascist? No, he was not. A militaristic governor in New Orleans who made the Nazi Gestapo look like a Catholic schoolgirl's choir. Bullshit. Laughable at Bermuda Hundred, a failure is both the politician and general officer, and considered by many as the ugliest general officer on both sides. General Butler tops the list as the worst general officer of the American Civil War. Okay, he's got to be trolling with this part. This has to be trolling. There's no fucking way this is real. Okay, so Butler was a bad general, and I've read Sean's account of the Bermuda Hundred campaign, and he got his fucking ass kicked. by Beauregard, who had maybe 1/3 or a quarter of the men. And Beauregard's men were basically militia, by the way. And he was containing Butler, who not only had professional troops, but even Gatling guns. Butler's strengths are that he was good at using innovation, so he saw the potential of things like the Gatling gun. And as a military governor in New Orleans, he was a bit harsh in terms of not allowing people to be out all hours of the night. He was a military governor, for fuck's sake, so what else do you expect? But a fascist? No, he wasn't. Butler was an abolitionist. And Butler was a fairly progressive politician up in Massachusetts. I mean, he was for things like public schools. I mean, a fascist? Are you fucking kidding me? It's got to be a joke. This has to be a joke, especially just the hyperbole about how bad he was in New Orleans. And okay, he probably was the ugliest general of the war. I will give him that. I mean, Butler is an ugly motherfucker. That is probably true. But yeah, he's bad, but he shouldn't be the worst. I would say Butler's maybe like third or fourth worst. And partly I'm giving him a little bit of a break because his opponent was Beauregard, who was regarded as a very good general. He was generally successful. He was certainly capable. He had a lot of experience. He had the respect of a lot of the senior people in the U.S. military scene. So yeah, I mean, Butler was up against a guy who was actually talented, and he got exposed. So I have to be a little bit lenient just because that was the case. But by the same token, I can also give Banks a little bit of a curb because Banks was up against Richard Taylor during the Red River campaign. And Richard Taylor was one of the best Confederate generals, especially in the West. So a lot of it's relative. So anyway, those are the top 10s.net worst Civil War generals brought to us by David Hurlbert, PhD. Yeah, I can't imagine if I were publishing something under my real name and putting PhD after it. There's no fucking way I would end an account with, and considered by many as the ugliest general officer on both sides. Like talking about somebody's personal appearance at the end of an article, even something fun like this. There's no way I would ever do anything like that. So I do have to give this guy some credit for having balls. Because, I mean, he clearly didn't give a fuck. Maybe he'd already gotten the diagnosis by then. I don't know. But, that deserves some credit, I guess. So, hats off for that. But this list in general was a bit ridiculous. It comes off as a little bit lost causey. Because it's very harsh on a lot of Union commanders, especially guys who weren't Grant. McClellan is number 2. That's the one that's the most ridiculous. Bragg, I think he got what he deserved. And then, yeah, Buell and Rosecrans, in my opinion, should not even be on this list. Who would I replace him with? Maybe Hood. Hood is pretty shit. Pemberton is shit. Can't think of who else would get on the list. Did Pope make it? Pope should have been on there. Pope was terrible. See, anyway, I don't know. Taco Cruiser, $5. Thank you, sir. Did the Romans stop innovating their naval technology after the Punic Wars ended? Yes. They did. And actually, they not only quit innovating, but because their sailors got more efficient at sailing, they first abandoned the Corvus, so they quit doing boarding tactics with the Corvus, and then they actually reverted from the quinquereme to the older trireme design. So if you're looking at the period where Pliny the Elder is trying to do disaster relief after Mount Vesuvius goes off, his fleet is all triremes. The quinquereme, I don't know when it fell out of use, but it fell out of use by the time that the Empire came about. And I'm also fairly confident, not 100%, but mostly confident, that say the Battle of Actium, where Octavian's fleet fought Antony's, that both sides were using triremes, not quinqueremes. So there you go. Let's see, yeah. So what do you guys think of this list? Yeah, I mean, Rosecrans should not have been on there at all. Rosecrans, I mean, fuck's sake. So, anyway, I have heard of ad block. I don't know how much it costs. I've never bought anything like that. Most sites are not buggy like this, so I don't bother. But anyway, thank you for everybody who showed up tonight. I think I'm going to peace out early. I've been going pretty hard this week, and I'd like to get a little bit of rest and chill out. Maybe, hell, I might even play a little bit of Yakuza tonight. I don't know. But anyway, thank you all for joining me. Thanks for all the super chats. Oh yeah, we got to determine who won the book. So let's do that really fast. Oh, Levant has a question. $2. Thank you, Levant. How generally interested in history is your girlfriend? She wasn't super interested before I met her. I mean, she would keep up with a few things here and there. She does have some historical interest. Like, she's more than willing to go to museums with me, or like the Indian mounds or stuff like that. But I think for the most part, she's more into art than history. Art, and she also likes a lot of fictional things. So she really likes Stephen King's books, and she also really enjoys actually the Dune universe now. She's started reading about that, so she's into that. And she's learning ASL and learning Italian. So she's got some interest, but not really all that many historical interest. Okay, let's see. This is weird. I'm pretty sure that the winner of the evening by a decent amount was Jack Griffin at around $30. I don't think anybody came particularly close to that. So, Jack, if you're on Discord, send me a message. You can also send me an email. And let me know whether you prefer either John Mann's The Terracotta Army, which is about the material remains of the first emperor's army. It also goes into a lot of interesting detail about how the Terracotta Army really played into contemporary politics in China, where Mao Zedong and the communists were trying to be the heirs to the Qin, and they were treating their opponents as the heirs to the Confucians. So it's got a lot of interesting stuff in there. He also talks about the historian Susuma Kian and some other things like that. Also how the terracotta warriors were made, how the modern replicas are made. So it's a pretty good slice of life, but also includes a lot of history. There's a lot of travel in here as well. So I think it's a good read overall. And the other option is Nicole Laro's book on funeral orations in Athens. So this is completely opposite. This is something which is a lot more abstract. It deals with the rhetoric that the Athenians used when they would do their annual funeral orations. And because it's a nice French work of scholarship, it's translated into English by Zone. Zone Books actually does a great job at translating French works into English and making them available. French scholars are much more readable for the most part than almost any other language tradition of scholarship. So her book reads very easily, and it's just a great way to explore a lot of the Athenian literature, which normally gets neglected in most surveys. So you learn a lot about funeral orations, some of the political speeches and court speeches and things like that, how the Athenians thought of valor, how they saw their own history. She goes into a whole lot of areas that are fascinating. So the point is, you got two options. Both of them are very good options, and all you got to do is just let me know which one you want. So you want John Mann or Nicole Laroe? You want China or Greece? So that is all that I have for you this evening, gentlemen. I would say ladies and gentlemen, but I know better. I've looked at the demographics. I think I do. I think I have precisely 2 female subscribers, as far as I can tell. At least people who show up for these kinds of streams. So anyway, that's all I have for you this evening. I will see you all next week when we will talk about Persia, hopefully. Until then, I will have another video on the Hellenistic period coming out Monday or Tuesday. But otherwise, I plan to keep it relatively quiet this week because last week was very busy and I need to catch up on some paperwork this week. So that's probably what I'll be doing. So rather than talking with you fine fellows, I will be grading fucking midterms and fun stuff like that. So yeah. Anyway, everybody have a good week, and I will see you next time when we will fight the Persian Wars and do some other cool stuff like that. Peace out.